One of the original monsters in Dungeons & Dragons, this creature comes from the minds of the creators of the game, Rob Kuntz and Gary Gygax. Sort of. The creature was imagined by Rob's brother Theron Kuntz and fleshed out by Gygax. There is no myth or legend that the Beholder is born from, and is solely a creation from the minds of these gentlemen, which just makes you wonder how many drugs they were doing. This monster is a floating sphere with a giant eyeball in the center, a mouth full of teeth, and little eye stalks on the top of it. That alone would scare off most reasonable people, and then you find out that the eyes can all shoot rays of various magic at you and your friends. All sane people will flee as quickly as possible. With over 20 variants of the Beholder throughout the editions, the floating eyeball of doom brings with it a long and storied history. From the giant Elder Orb, a massive beholder skilled in the art of arcane magic, to the Doom Sphere, an undead beholder craved from the energy of powerful explosions. The Beholder has a wealth of information and history behind it, and this is going to be a deep and long look into their history. The Beholder makes its debut in the Greyhawk supplement released in 1975 for the original edition of Dungeons & Dragons, where they're also called Eye Tyrants and Spheres of Many Eyes. Both monikers are apt titles for the creature. They are 6 feet wide, have a single big ugly eye in the middle of their round body, and 10 little stalks with eyes atop it. They float very slowly, and are known to be neutral with a bent towards chaos. We are given a single piece of artwork on them, and it is the front cover of the supplement, and it is pretty badass. It's of a ferocious fight between a fighter and a beholder, and you can really tell that there's action and heroics involved. Well, maybe not so much action as a fat balloon looking stoned out of its mind, and a warrior unsure if the monster is just a prank or if he is about to be killed. Luckily, the white box set of Dungeons & Dragons was reprinted in 2013 by Wizards of the Coast, and while every book stayed the same in the interior, each one got new and awesome cover art. Now it truly is a fearsome battle to the death against the Eye Tyrant. Getting back to the mechanics of the Beholder, it has 3 components that make up this monster: the body, the main eye, and the eye stalks, and each have their own different hit points, armor class, and abilities. The body has 40 hit points and armor class of 0, and is what allows the Beholder to levitate and float about. The main eye has 20 hit points and armor class of 7, with a single anti-magic property. Lastly, the eye stalks have the lowest with only 10 hit points and armor class of 2, but with a variety of effects for each eye stalk. Speaking of eye stalks, that is its main offensive and defensive mechanism. If you get into combat with it, keep an eye on it, as it can fire off 1d4 eyes per round. The eye rays are as follows: 1. Charm Person, 2. Charm Monster, 3. Sleep Spell, 4. Telekinesis, 5. Flesh to Stone Ray, 6. Disintegrate Ray, 7. Fear Ray, 8. Slow Spell, 9. Serious Wound Ray, 10. Death Ray, and the 11th, the Big Eye, Anti-Magic Ray. It's worth noting a few things about the various abilities the eyes have. Most of them are based on the spell by the same name, and finding out what it does is straightforward. A couple, however, don't correspond directly to a spell of the same name, so the Dungeon Master has to figure out what to do. One of the hardest to locate was figuring out what a Death Ray did, if we're ignoring its literal name. Luckily, if you opened up the Dungeons & Dragons box set released in 1974 and went to the first book, Men in Magic, and then stumbled upon the Finger of Death spell, it clarifies that it acts like a Death Ray. As far as we can tell, beyond the Death Ray save table, that is the only spot in the Dungeons & Dragons box set that has anything to do with Death Rays. We feel for the Dungeon Masters of old who had to remember that there was a term used twice in another book and had to scrounge that up whenever they were trying to prepare a balloon with the eyeballs to kill off their party in a beautiful TPK. The biggest problem for your magic users, though, is that Big Eye is an anti-magic ray, and they aren't going to be using any of their favorite spells like Fireball or Magic Missile while being hit by it. While the text is a bit confusing, it seems as if the center eye activates every round, but maybe it can only use its big eye if it forgoes using its smaller eyes that round. It isn't clear. The Beholder graces us with their presence in the Monster Manual, released in 1977, and they are no longer looking like an awkward balloon. Instead, they look like a weird insect with plates of chitin and stupid hair. The Beholder is usually found lurking in underground dungeons and is filled with such hate that it will attack you on sight. If you happen to find a Beholder and you are suitably powerful, it may try to negotiate with you, but you should still just plan on fighting it, as it really wants to eat you. If you recall from the previous edition, there was a lot of different hit points and armor classes depending on whether you attacked its eye versus its body or the eye stalks, We are given answers to all that and what percentage chance you have of actually striking specific parts of the beholder. A beholder has 2/3 of its hit points in its body, and if you knock the body to 0, the beholder dies. There is a 75% chance that your attacks strike the body. After that, the main eye has the other third of its hit points, and you have a 10% chance of striking it. Once it is destroyed, it can no longer use its main eye on you. The last of your attacks will be directed at the eye stalks and eyes. There's a 10% chance of striking the eye stalks, and only a 5% chance of hitting the small eyes. Each eye stalk has its own set of hit points, 8 to 12, and if you knock an eye stalk to 0 hit points, it destroys that eye stalk. Any hit against the small eyes instantly destroys it, and you determine which eye stalk or eye was hit by rolling a d10. Of course, that begs the question, what happens when you destroy an eye stalk and the beholder TPKs the party, and you encounter it a few months later with a brand new set of characters? Will it still have a destroyed eye stalk? Luckily, Dragon Magazine number 76, released in 1983, provides an Ecology of the Beholder article, and it provides clarifications, descriptions, and the answers to all the important questions about eye stalks, baby beholders, and more. The answer to the eye stalk question is that they grow 1 eye stalk per week, so yes, that beholder will have all their eye stalks back when you try to kill them with a new set of characters. The article also goes on to provide a new description of the center eye and its anti-magic ray. Characters can now see the ray as it gives off a dull gray light, and more importantly, we now know that the anti-magic ray extends 140 feet from the middle eye in a cone shape. The beholder will focus this ray on one target at a time and is intelligent enough to look for spellcasters or, failing that, will target a creature wearing little to no armor, as experience has taught them that magic users can't wear armor and still cast their spells. Beholders don't like other creatures, attacking any of them on sight, though that doesn't mean they don't have minions to their bidding. Gargoyles are the minions of choice for beholders, apparently because they're too stupid to know any better and too weak to be an actual threat to the beholder. These minions will serve out their eye tyrant's will, whether it be guarding the treasure hoard, putting into action a devastating trap, or simply gathering up a huge amount of food for the beholder every day. As noted previously, the beholder levitates in the air and can slowly fly in any direction of its choice. This is possible as the beholder has a magical organ called the levator magnus, which is found in the center of the beholder with its brain wrapped around the organ to protect it. Nothing can dispel this magical flight of the beholder, not even another beholder, and so they make their lairs and homes in complex tunnels that make use of vertical space. One drawback of having this magical organ is that a beholder is incredibly susceptible to a strong wind pushing them around, and thus, the main reason why beholders make their home underground is to get away from all that wind that will knock them around. We also get an answer to the burning question that has been on everyone's mind. How do these spheres of destruction reproduce? Beholders are asexual and lay 1 to 4 eggs per year as an instinctual habit. When we say lay, what we really mean is they vomit the foot-long eggs out of their mouths. These eggs are an ugly, pasty white color and smell horrible, thus keeping predators away. Once disgorged from their mouth in some secluded location picked by the beholder, the eggs will take 2 to 12 months to hatch. Like the poor sea turtles who are abandoned on a sandy beach, the beholder eggs are abandoned by its parent to fend for themselves. We ask you to not judge. It's difficult being a single parent. Once the eggs hatch, beholder babies can defend themselves a little bit better than a sea turtle, as they have all their eye ray powers. While a newborn's bite is nowhere as powerful as an adult's, their eye ray effects all work but are described as reduced. There is no information as to how it is reduced. However, within a year, they are fully grown and ready to kill you and then feast on your corpse. As mentioned before, beholders eat a massive amount and are omnivores, sitting atop the food chain, eating whoever and whatever they please. Human flesh is one of their favorites, and with a cast iron stomach, they can eat just about anything. What they can't eat, they just spit out, and they use rocks to help their digestion. Due to their hunger being nearly insatiable, beholders are found few and far between, as they need a large enough hunting ground to satisfy their diets. In Frank Mintzer's basic Dungeons & Dragons box set, Set 3 Companion Rules, released in 1984, the beholder is reintroduced and given a greater description about its abilities and life compared to the previous Monster Manual entry. However, the best part about it is that they no longer look like a sad balloon or a weird insect. Now they look fearsome and ready to kill. There are a variety of clarifications and simplifications in this new version of the beholder, ranging from traveling with their young babies for a year to how far each eye ray's range is. The anti-magic ray, projected from its central large eye, is a continuous beam and has a range of 60 feet. If the beholder sees someone getting ready to cast a spell, it will turn towards that individual to disrupt the spell, though its small eyes cannot shoot their rays at that person, as the anti-magic ray also disrupts their abilities. Another issue for the beholder is that it cannot turn its main eye up or down, as the description states that the ray cannot be aimed above or below the beholder. Unlike in the previous edition, the basic version eliminates random chances of hitting different body parts, and instead, you must declare what you are attacking before you make an attack. Any damage you deal to the eye stalks does not hurt the beholder, though if you can cut an eye stalk off, the dungeon master rules determine which eye stalk, and the beholder can no longer use that magical ray against you. Unfortunately for you, the beholder has a faster recovery time when it comes to regrowing eye stalks, and it only takes 2 to 8 days to grow a new one. The first variant of the beholder makes an appearance in the Dungeons & Dragons Master Rules, released in 1985, and is known simply as the Undead Beholder. This abomination resembles a normal beholder, and only a cleric of 25th level or higher can see it for the undead creature that it is. The Undead Beholder is a horror to behold. It has almost double hit points for each part of the creature, and its armor class is even lower than before, making it incredibly difficult to actually hit. Not only does it have more hit points and a better armor class, but it can also only be hurt by magical weapons of +2 or better, has all the normal undead immunities, and its main body will regenerate 3 hit points per round. If that isn't enough, it can change into gaseous form at will, and if it is dropped to 0 hit points, it is forced to assume a gaseous form and cannot regenerate hit points. If it is forced to take this form due to dropping to 0 hit points, it will hide in complete darkness, and the Undead Beholder keeps many places permanently dark inside its lair for this purpose. Once it is in darkness, it can start to regenerate after an hour. There actually is no mention of completely destroying this Undead Beholder. You just have to keep dropping it to 0 hit points and hope you can get in and out inside of an hour. Another major change for the Undead Beholder is that the abilities of its eyes are changed. The center eye no longer projects an anti-magic field, and while you may be thinking how great that is, it gets replaced by something that is arguably much worse. The Undead Beholder's main eye now produces a ray of reflection, meaning this ray bounces back a spell onto the individual that casts it. And if your cleric tries to turn undead, they must make a saving throw or run away screaming in fear. So before you think about casting that meteor swarm at the big bad evil guy, take a moment and ponder if you might be killing yourself and the rest of your party. Most of the eye stalks all have new abilities, and they mostly have to do with undeath and necrotic energy. These new functions include Animate Dead, Continual Darkness, 2 different energy drain rays, a paralysis ray, and, before you ask, yes, it still has one little eye stalk that shoots a death spell at you. The Beholder explodes in the 2nd edition, starting with its appearance in the Monstrous Compendium Volume 1, released in 1989, and in the Spelljammer Adventures in Space box set, released also in 1989. Various types of Beholder and Beholderkin are developed throughout this edition, and the paranoia that Beholders are well known for is born into their lore. The largest group of Beholders are those created for the Spelljammer setting, with vast numbers of different species of Beholders sailing through the void on their ships. Each of those Beholders sailing on their ships assumes that they are the pinnacle of their species, and that all other Beholders are disabled or abominations. By our count, there are at least 20 different Beholders introduced in 2nd edition, and we're going to attempt to talk about as many as we can before we go mad. Starting with the Monstrous Compendium, we are introduced to the typical Beholder and the Eye of the Deep. Precious little changes for our Beholder, except now their anti-magic field extends out from their main eye in a 90-degree cone, making it far more effective when dropping it on their enemies and preventing spellcasters from spellcasting. The art is pretty disappointing for such a fearsome creature, and looks more goofy than terrifying. The next type introduced is the Eye of the Deep. This is a Beholder that lives deep in the oceans and resembles a Beholder if you squint really hard at it. It has a spherical body and a central main eye, and that is the extent of what it shares with others of its kind. It has 2 oversized lobster claws it uses to attack its prey, and has 2 eye stalks that shoot out rays of Hold Person and Hold Monster. Instead of creating an aura of anti-magic, its main eye shoots out a blinding light that stuns prey so it can swim up and start biting and tearing with its claws. As if we need more reason to never go into the ocean again. Jumping over to the Spelljammer setting, we are introduced to the Hive Mother and the Orbi, both of whom are critical to the Beholder's ability to travel through the void of space. The Orbis Beholders, known as Orbi, are strange white spheres that many assume to be stunted Beholders. They have no functional small eyes, an oversized central eye that is milky white, and a small mouth void of teeth. The Orbi are incredibly weak compared to common Beholders, though it is the Orbi that allows the Beholder race to travel through space. The Orbi are the conduit through which the energy of the other Beholders on the ship passes, channeling the energy into a force that can move the ship through the void. They are an organic Spelljammer helm. These Orbi will always be in the deepest, most protected parts of their Spelljammer ships with the Hive Mother. The Hive Mother is a massive creature, twice the size of a common beholder, with a mouth large enough to swallow a human in one bite. The Hive Mother does not have any eye stalks, but rather has all the eyes as small nodules across their body, and its central eye is hooded and well protected from attack. This beholder is essentially the ship's captain, as it alone can control all the others on the ship. This creature becomes one with its ship, allowing it to control it and guide it through the void of space. The next group of beholders are introduced in the Monstrous Compendium Spelljammer Appendix released in 1990, and this is the beginning of how beholders take over the Spelljammer setting, and you get phrases in the campaign setting books that specifically say things like, "If your characters are sick to the death of beholders." The first beholderkin introduced in the book are the directors, followed by the examiners, lensmen, overseers, and finally, the watcher. These beholderkin take the typical form of the beholder, and then change and morph them as something you may not even recognize as a beholder. The directors are the warrior caste of beholders, and are smaller with 3 tendrils on their bottom side that allows it to cling to a mount like a massive centipede and ride it valiantly into battle. The special eye power it gets is that its main eye can deflect all attacks that originate in front of it. This reduces damage and gives bonuses to its saving throws. It can also retract its eye stalks and shoot out different arrays like Magic Missile, Burning Eye, Wall of Ice, and other offensive spells. Examiners are the tool-wielding workers of the beholder race. Their primary function is the study and creation of magic items. They have no middle eye, but rather have a small mouth flanked by 4 spindly appendages, which can be used to grab tools to assist in their work. It also has 4 spindly eye stalks that can, enlarge reduce, identify legend lore, transmute form, or cast spell reflection. The lensmen have a starfish-like, almost humanoid body with 5 limbs, and its main eye and mouth are on the chest of this creature. 4 of its limbs have hands at the end of them, while the 5th is a long tentacle. It uses these hands to wield weapons, preferably some type of polearm, and they are used for cannon fodder and labor. The middle eye will only have one of the following abilities: Emotion, Heal, Dispel Magic, Tongues, Phantasmal Force, or Protections. Overseers are one of the strangest variations of the beholder, and they take on the appearance of giant trees with 13 eye stalks that appear to be branches, 3 mouths that wrap around the main body, and 8 thorn-covered limbs used to hold tools or strike out with. These beholders are only second to the Hive Mother in the beholder hierarchy, and their eye stalk powers are Cone of Cold, Dispel Magic, Paralysis, Chain Lightning, Telekinesis, Emotion, Mass Charm, Domination, Mass Suggestion, Major Creation, Spell Turning, Certain Spell Immunity, and Temporal Stasis. The last group are the Watchers, and they are the information brokers and least brave of the beholder race. They are considered barely above the lensmen, making them very low in the hierarchy, and are renowned for fleeing battles and using their powers to misdirect would-be attackers. They have a 6-foot diameter body with 3 large eyes that circle it, and on the top of its spherical body is a compound eye with a ring of 6 eye spots. They are incredibly hard to sneak up on, as you might have guessed, with so many eyeballs. The bottom of their spherical body ends in a prehensile pad right behind their mouth and rasp-like tongue. Its middle eye powers are True Seeing and ESP, Advanced Illusion and Demi-Shadow Magic, and Telekinesis and Teleport. The compound eye can cast Message, Tongues, and Suggestion. The next beholder comes from Spelljammer's book Wild Space, released in 1990, and they are known as the Beholder Mage. They are either born without the ability of its central eye, or was once a beholder who destroyed their central eye. Beholders are known to be powerfully intelligent, but unable to cast magic due to the anti-magic ray of their central eye, crippling them from being able to cast spells. Once that eye no longer functions, a beholder can begin learning and casting spells to become more powerful and become known as a beholder mage. They are often exiled from their societies for being so different. Following closely behind, the Death Tyrant from Lost Ships, released in 1990, finally shambles to life in this edition and has the same abilities as a Dead and Basic edition. They are created from a dying beholder when a powerful spell is cast, transforming them from life and into undeath, though this is not something that any beholder seeks out, as they become mindless and forced to follow the set instructions of whoever changed them. The Monstrous Manual, released in 1993, consolidates all the beholders before it and introduces 3 new beholders into the family: the Death Kiss, the Goth, and the Spectator. The Death Kiss, also known as the Eye of Terror, has only a middle eye, and in its place of eye stalks is 10 tentacles that attack and latch onto its targets, that it can then use on itself to heal lost hit points. Next is the Goth, which can eat the magical essence of an item by either consuming it or by using one of the tentacle abilities that allow it to drain the magical power of nearby magical items. Items with charges loses a single charge when this ability is activated, whereas permanent magic items, like a +1 sword, have their magical properties subdued for 1 round. The other abilities it gains for its eye stalks are Repulsion, Cone of Cold, Lightning Bolt, Paralyzation, and Cause Serious Wounds. Spectators are the last to be introduced, and they may be one of the more straightforward of the beholders. They lack the aggressive xenophobia of other beholders and can be summoned to act as guards and protect treasure hoards. They have a singular focus and will serve that role for 101 years, though this binding can end early by taking the item being guarded by the spectator. The spectator resorts to violence only if given no choice, but otherwise acts very friendly and will try to communicate with others and try to warn them off from taking anything it was summoned to guard, though it doesn't care if the thief takes something else from the pile that the spectator was not ordered to guard. They have only 4 eye stalks, and they have the following powers: create food and water, cause serious wounds, paralyzation, and telepathy. The Monstrous Manual leaves off with a final bit of information stating that, given the plastic nature of the beholder, mutations are common, and abominations are constantly leading to new types of beholders never seen before. A few more known types of beholders are the Doomspheres, ghostly undead created by explosions, the Aster Eater, a boulder-like creature with no eyes, the Gorebell, a beholder that explodes when struck, along with several other variations. The final bit of information we'll leave on is that in the book I, Tyrant, released in 1996, it is revealed that there was once a massive city of over 2,000 beholders that resided far below the surface. For thousands of years they existed together, constantly fighting and politicking against each other until eventually they destroyed each other through civil unrest and their extreme xenophobia of not only other races but of each other. The city was lost for hundreds of years, though a Hive Mother has discovered the city and is attempting to restore it to its former glory. Before we jump into the next edition, I want to ask you to like and subscribe the video. It really helps the channel grow. In addition, I want to talk about our sponsor, me. If you want to support us, you can check out our book, Toolcraft. This is a source book for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, all about crafting. It includes 40 different tools, kits, and supplies, everything in the player's handbook. A couple extra ones we did, like fishing tackle or corpse stitcher's supplies. Includes over 400 plus recipes in the book, everything from arrows, bombs, potions, elixirs, new vehicles, new fortifications, everything that you could think of that you wanted to create. Hope you give it a check out. We have incredible hardcover, softcover, and as a PDF. Anyway, let's get back into the Beholder. The Beholder is brought into the next edition in the Monster Manual, released in 2000 and then in 2003, and introduces the Goth alongside the Common Beholder in the 3.5 version of the Monster Manual. Later, the Beholder appears in the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, released in 2001, and then makes appearance in the Monsters Compendium Monsters of Faerun, also released in 2001, with the release of the Death Tyrant, the Death Kiss, the Eyeball, the Gouger, and the Beholder Mage. Without getting too far into the weeds about each and every Beholder, like in 2nd edition, let's briefly go over these new types and how they operate. The Eyeball Beholder is a tiny version of the Common Beholder that lives in the wild and travels in packs so that they can hunt larger creatures. They have 1 middle eye and 4 eye stalks. That middle eye has no powers, and the eye stalk's powers are as follows: Cause Fear, Daze, Mage Hand, and Ray of Frost. Evil spellcasters will venture into the wild to capture one and train it to be a familiar, transforming an eye stalk into a spell stalk, and it can then deliver touch spells with it. The Gouger Beholderkin was created long ago by fearsome, a race of incredibly powerful and very evil aberrations that wanted to wipe out all other life on the planes. To defeat the Beholder, the fearsome created their own beholders known as Gouger, whose sole purpose was to hunt down and kill other types of beholders. At 10 feet wide, they are much larger than normal beholder, and they have long, disgusting tongues that hang out of their mouths, from which constant screaming is produced. It has 10 eye stalks that are constantly twitching and looking around, darting from one thing to the next. The Gouger's eye stalks have none of the powers that a common beholder does, but the middle eye does emit the same anti-magic ray. In 2005, The Lords of Madness, the Book of Aberrations, was released and includes a fascinating look at many of the greatest aberrations to ever visit the material plane. We mentioned in this book in our past deep dives concerning the Aboleth and the Grell. As you might have guessed, the beholders are also considered one of the greatest aberrations and have a chapter concerning them and their society. The book also provides information for some of our old favorites like the Hive Mother, the Director, the Eye of the Deep, the Overseer, and the Spectator. There is a ton of useful information on the beholder, and we aren't going to be able to touch on all of it, though we are going to let you in on a little secret that we discovered while reading the book. The most important thing you will ever need to know about the beholder is summed up in one perfect sentence found in the middle of the chapter. Beholders are, by any definition of the word, insane. To fully understand how that sentence can be so perfect, let's get into the beholder and its anatomy. We start with the main eye of the beholder, which traditionally has always been fairly weak. In actuality, it is quite hard and made up of a number of lenses, with the iris being constructed in a crystal-like structure. The construction and unique shapes of the eyes of a beholder allow it to exude magical auras, and that just by a beholder reading a scroll or gazing on a magical artifact, the beholder can suck some of that magical energy into itself. While no organ is specifically the reason for the beholder's ability to float, as the organs in the beholder are far too mysterious for anyone to actually understand, many of the organs will still float for several hours after the body has died. So far, the anatomy seems perfectly reasonable for a floating eyeball, but some of the insanity doesn't really start until you start learning how the beholders reproduce. Because beholders hate each other, they are xenophobic to a crazy degree. The race would have no chance of continuing on because all beholders assume that they are the perfection of the race and that all others are horrible sights against their goddess and should be destroyed. The way beholders reproduce is that they have a strange organ that grows underneath their tongue, and over the course of 6 months, the babies grow inside that womb. This becomes so painful that a beholder is unable to actually work their jaw, and their tongue hangs out their mouth during the last few months. Once the babies are ready to fly free, the beholder expels them from its mouth and bites off the womb organ. This makes it so the beholder cannot reproduce again, and the baby holders, there are typically a dozen in there, must bite and tear their way through this gory mess. In basic edition, the beholders can actually be found with up to 4 of their young floating through their lair. In first edition, the beholders just left their children upon a rocky ledge and wished them all the best with life. Third edition also has its own ideas about how to raise a baby beholder, and it includes the mother beholder watching their children chew their way out of the floating womb, and then gazes lovingly at them, deciding which ones are the ugliest. Because the mother beholder is comparing the newborns against herself, as she is the perfect version of a beholder and all others are horrible slights against the great mother, any newborn that looks too different from her is immediately eaten, shortly followed by her own womb, which she also devours. The rest of the newborns are then chased out of her lair within an hour, and they must go and fend for themselves. Their eye stalks don't work, they only have their floating ability, and somehow the beholder race is still around to this very day. This entire experience would lead one to assume that beholders don't really care for their parent, but that isn't completely true. Beholders are not the evil, atheistic creatures everyone assumes they are, as they all respect the Great Mother, a strange elder god that exists in a far-off realm. Every beholder assumes they were actually born from the Great Mother, and that they are the spitting image of the Great Mother. While they don't worship the Great Mother, as they find it impossible to think beyond themselves in such a way, they do treat the idea of her with respect and go about killing all other beholders because they are a horrible slight against the Great Mother due to how deformed and hideous they look. It's probably the nicest Mother's Day gift we could ever think to give our mother as well. Much like in the previous editions, beholders don't really get along, though there are very rare circumstances when you can find them in groups. Sometimes 2 beholders might become friends. We aren't saying it's a long-lasting friendship, but they get along until one gets a bit too paranoid by the other simply existing. Then they attack each other with vicious bites and a mouthpick weapon. You might be asking, what's a mouthpick weapon? And it's exactly what you think it is. It is a great weapon that a beholder wields with their mouth. Their tongue then is able to manipulate the magic in the weapon to operate a pincer, have it do magical effects, and more. It's awesome to imagine these 2 floating balls, each with a mouthpick and lance in their mouth, jousting each other and screaming in their garbled, drooling tongue that only they are the perfect beholder. But groups of beholders aren't restricted to just a few friendly acquaintances, but also to entire cities that are overseen by the Overseer and the Hive Mother. These beholders are watched over and pretty much forced to work together by the magic of the other 2 beholders, and they always have a set purpose. Typically, it's to destroy the world, but it could also be a focus on going out into spell-jammer space, or constructing a new magical artifact for the Great Mother. The Overseer, the strange beholder that looks more like a tree, can only control about a dozen beholders, while the hive mother can control pretty much as many as she wants, including individual overseers that can then control more beholders for her. The hive mothers ensure that the beholders don't end up murdering each other in her hive, but instead make them paranoid about other hives and their hive mothers. This leads to the beholders creating overly complicated battle strategies to kill off other hives of beholders filled with horrific monstrosities that make the Great Mother weep with how hideous and deformed they are. The beholder and its many variants show up in numerous books in 4th edition, starting with the Eye of the Flame and the Eye Tyrant, the common type of beholder, in the Monstrous Manual released in 2008. While this edition is short on description, it does follow in the grand tradition of providing numerous beholders to throw at a party. Each new beholder builds on the previous lore, and thus we learn that the beholders are not of this world, but rather come from the far realm, a place of madness and insanity. They have arrived in the plains to decimate and control all, but first, they must kill the other beholders who think they run the place. The first variant we are introduced to is the Eye of the Flame, which is a small beholder with the strange ability of lighting people on fire. Its main eye causes a target to become susceptible to fire, then it uses one of its eye stalks to shoot fire, setting you on fire. If that isn't enough, it has 2 more rays at its disposal, telekinesis and fear. This beholder is the lowest on the food chain for its kind and has grown accustomed to working for other beholders, even if it doesn't like it. The Eye Tyrant is the common type of beholder, and while a few changes exist in its eye rays, they largely stay the same except for its main eye. No longer does it create an anti-magic cone, now it simply dazes you, which is a very powerful condition in this edition. The biggest boon to the Eye Tyrant is that not only does it have 900 hit points, but it also gets to shoot eye rays at anyone who starts their turn with about 25 feet of it, meaning if it is fighting a group of 4 adventurers and is close to them, it gets a chance to shoot its eye rays 6 times around until it gets a bit hurt, and then the Eye Tyrant gets furious and can fire even more of its rays at those who would mar its perfect beholder form. In Monster Manual 2, released in 2009, 4 more beholder variants are unleashed with the return of the Goth, the new Eye of Frost, the Eye of Chaos, and the Ultimate Tyrant. The Goth is now the weakest of all the beholders, and the book goes on to point out that it is a complete coward and will use all of its allies as a meat shield. Up next is the Eye of Frost, which lives in areas of ice and snow and, you guessed it, has a freeze ray and a cold ray at its disposal. Following that is the Eye of Chaos, which takes insanity to a whole new level. It is the embodiment of wanton destruction for no other reason than to watch the fallout it causes. It is a spawnling of a beholder who ventured into the abyss and came back more fiend than aberration. The last beholder is the Ultimate Tyrant and now sits atop the food chain in the world of the beholder. It is a massive creature with new powers, 10 eye stock abilities, and over 1,000 hit points. The Ultimate Tyrant is not to be taken lightly. A quick rundown of its abilities make you realize that these creatures are a perfect time to try out those new running shoes and take off in the opposite direction. The middle eye can daze and slow a creature, with each failed saving throw bringing more misery upon this unfortunate target. And it can fire off rays at anyone who starts their turn just a little too close. New to the scene in this edition is the Spasmodic Ray, and if our floating ball of death gets hurt too much, it'll start shooting random eye rays against everyone that is even slightly in the same ballpark as it. Not only does it do it after it's taken a bit of damage, but as a final salvo, it shoots out those rays again as its last shuddering death rattle. We don't know about you, but maybe just don't interact with them and have a really strong wall between you and it. The Monster Manual 3, released in 2010, is chock full of things that keep us awake at night, including the final 3 beholders for this edition: the Beholder Spawn, the Eye of Shadow, and the Ghost Beholder. The Beholder Spawn is a baby beholder, and the text goes on to say that you don't want to know how they were created because it will drive you insane and you will fall into madness, which, after reading the 3rd edition's graphic description of baby making, we agree. Following the baby beholder, we are given the Eye of the Shadow, who are cruel and twisted beholders that have lost themselves by spending too much time in the Shadowfell. Lurking in the shadows and dealing damage in the darkness, these beholders are corrupted and wish to spread darkness and the dismal workings of the Plane of Shadows. Finally, we have the Ghost Beholder, and it is an ending that only the evilest and stubbornest of beholders will ever meet. While most beholders, when killed, will finally accept their fate, these beholders are so evil and twisted that they refuse to fully die and form as spirits. Due to this experience, these beholders are actually fairly cautious considering who they once were in life, and will hide inside of walls and just poke a single eye stalk out to spy on parties and attack at the most inopportune times. This edition carries on the philosophy that more beholders is better, and we are reintroduced to 4 types of beholders in the Monster Manual, released in 2014, before getting introduced to 4 more in Volo's Guide to Monsters, released in 2016. The Monster Manual provides information on the Death Tyrant, the Beholder, the Spectator, and a Zombie Beholder, while Volo's Guide to Monsters has an expanded section of lore, as well as the Death Kiss, the Goth, the Gazer, and the Mind Witness. Before talking about the new lore surrounding the Beholders, let's quickly go over the new variations and any interesting abilities they get. The only new Beholder in the Monster Manual is the Zombie Beholder, and it's about what you expect from something named that. It is a mindless undead, much like how the original Death Tyrants were written back in 2nd edition, and has several broken eye stalks and thus a reduced number of eye ray attacks it can use, and has no main eye ability. The suggested eye rays it has in Undeath are Paralyzing Ray, Fear Ray, Innervation Ray, and Disintegration Ray, which just happen to be our favorites. The only new Beholder featured in Volo's Guide to Monsters, as the Gazer is just a different name for the Eyeball Beholder from 3rd edition, is the Mind Witness. And while it was mentioned in 3rd edition, it was talked about only as a template for the half-illithid Mind Flayer, and was given the respect or lore it deserved. The Mind Witness is a beholder that has been stripped of its identity and imprinted on by an Elder Brain, the ruler of a Mind Flayer colony. The Mind Flayers use the Mind Witness as a distributor of communications, relying on its vast intelligence to help spread orders and keep a colony running smoothly. The beholder is transformed from this process and loses a number of its eye stalks as they transform into tentacles, and the beholder loses its paranoia and xenophobia, but gains an intrinsic need to give orders and commands. We are at a point where we're actually starting to feel bad for a beholder, so let's jump over to something horrifying that all beholders do. Reproduction is a horrifying act the beholders perform in the previous editions, and only gets worse every edition. In this edition, beholders dream of themselves, and another beholder spawns into reality. Well, that's a bit. It's not even a little horrifying. Oh wait, the 2 beholders then fight to the death most of the time. That's more like it. The reproduction cycle of the beholders is a bit more sporadic of an event and relies on dreaming beholders to have feverish dreams of themselves. Of course, if something haunts their dreams, like say a lot of blood or magic, they may produce a death kiss or a goth instead of another beholder. If that happens, sometimes a beholder might keep them around as pets, other times the beholder runs away in fear. Beholders can also dream of creating a hive, a colony of sorts, where they are the masters, and then they spawn up to a dozen small little gazers, or eyeballs as they were previously known, and they treat the gazers as spoiled pets. If they have any wizard minions, they'll force the wizard to accept a gazer as a familiar, as the parent beholder can see through their gazer as if they are there. Xenophobia and paranoia are taken to an extreme for our beholders, and their defining trait is that they are constantly assuming they are under attack by other beholders, creatures, or the entire planes themselves. Every beholder knows they are the perfection of beholder kind, and everyone else is trying to kill them due to how perfect they are. A beholder has no way of understanding that maybe, just maybe, it isn't the end-all, be-all of what it means to be a floating eyeball. No one knows where these beholders hail from, and if they have a god or deity they worship, or assume they are the perfect form of, no one has ever learned about it. Beholders rarely talk to others as if equals, and if they deign to do so, it usually means they're about to pull a trap and kill you. Beholders, due to just how massively intelligent they are always forming plans, and many have found their home below a city where it can control the city using its minions and servants. A beholder might become a Prime Lord, using its evil tendencies to create massive amounts of wealth that it can gain power with, or it might get involved in politics using its minions to help keep the laws the same in a city for whatever insane plan it has coming up in the world. Beholders have a plan for every eventuality, and many claim that Beholder can never be surprised, as it has a plan for anything you could think of. Even the wacky machinations of your adventuring party aren't enough to surprise it. The Beholders arrive back in Spelljammer with the release of Spelljammer Adventures of Space, released in 2022, where we get information about their tyrant ships, a new Beholder, and a tavern. There isn't a ton of information in these books, but we do learn that no 2 tyrant ships look the same, but they are all spherical ships, and you don't need a special beholder to attune to the spelljamming helm and fly it around. While only beholders can use the helm, they don't need a hive mother or an Orby in this edition. Next up, we learn about the Eyemonger, which looks like an asteroid when it closes its eyes, and then surprise! It's a beholder. The book tells us it has no use for treasure, but it does keep it in its stomach. While that might be a weird detail, it does let you know that the beholder loves to bite and swallow its prey, and, unlike a real beholder with an anti-magic suppression cone on the outside, it has one inside its body and pointed directly at its stomach. This means wizards aren't teleporting out or casting a fireball spell to give it a sore tummy. Lastly, the Eyemonger has no eye stalks to shoot with magic abilities, you just have to watch out for its hungry mouth. Now we mentioned a tavern, and that's a bit weird. But on the Rock of Brawl, you can find a tavern called the Happy Beholder. It is run by Large Luigi, a lawful beholder who has an encyclopedic knowledge of all sorts of topics and is happy to share with anyone looking for information. As you might guess, few thieves or criminals make trouble in this tavern, overseen by a beholder. The last book the beholder appears in is the Monster Manual, released in 2024 for the updated 5th edition rule set. There are almost no changes beyond its lore getting cut in half, but we do learn that beholders love collecting magic items and the petrified bodies of heroes they defeated. They then use their grotesque collection to decorate their lair. We should make one last honorable mention in this deep dive to one of the most well-known of the beholders, Xanathar. This beholder is a powerful crime lord in the city of Waterdeep and is actually more of a title than a name, though it didn't start out that way. The Xanathar has been around since Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, and several beholders have come in and killed the previous holder of the name, gaining its title and its control of the Xanathar's guild. Zushash is the latest Xanathar, and is well known for his absolute paranoid love for his goldfish, Silgar. Rumors are, Silgar has to be constantly replaced without Zushash noticing, as goldfish don't really live that long, and no one wants to see a bereaved beholder ruining everyone's day. The beholder is a tyrant of eyes, imposing its will on all, for it is what perfection is, and doesn't everyone want to serve perfection? They are a terror of paranoia and xenophobia, constantly making plans, constantly distrusting minions and allies, and always ready for whatever you could think of. If you ever see a sphere floating in the air with 10 tentacles, don't stop to count the tentacles, just run. Got something you'd like to see a deep dive on? Let us know in the comments below.